Attendees are starting to come in, and it looks like we are live and recording. Chair Brown, it's to you.
Are we good to go?
Yes.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good transition. Well, we're a little behind schedule, but that's all right. Some of the stuff will go pretty quick tonight. Right off the bat, though, we have the flag salute, and Director Pyros is always volunteers to do that. So, Rebecca, thank you very much.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Director Pyros, always a big thank you for doing that. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Quick review of the agenda. Old business will be our resolution on authorizing the credit and financial agreements that we talked about earlier. It'll be Nikki Fowler. Under new business, we will have appoint student representative. So a lot of us have really not gotten to do that. It'll be fun tonight. And then Greg Costello is going to do a presentation on Division 22 assurances. I'm sure if you guys read through that, there's quite a few pages there. Greg will be busy on that one. And then the next one will be what we just worked on. So that will be the statement on the complainant. Our work session discussions, again, are work sessions, so we won't be voting on any of that stuff. We will just be talking about it. And we'll try to follow the Roberts rules where each person gets a chance to talk before we go around again. Some of those will, probably go quicker than others. So, and we'll see if we can get done on time again tonight. So with that said, our first thing up is the resolution 2021-04 authorizing credit and financial agreements for the property. Nikki Fowler, you're up.
Okay, you saw this originally at our last meeting. And so the packet has not changed. The resolution has not changed. We're looking for a motion to approve the resolution that's before you to allow us to move forward in seeking financing for the Dundee property. Are there any questions?
I did have a question on that, Nikki. We bounced back and forth on a time frame. Which one are we trying to approve or not approve tonight? Which was it, the 5-year, 10-year, or what were we doing?
Right. Well, you had the three options. I believe we recommended the 5-year with the bullet payment. So it would be interest only for those first several years. The last year, the bulk payment would be due. But you did have the option to look at the 10-year. So if you wanted to vote for the 10-year with the first several years of interest, and then with principal after that, and just in case we needed a little more time to sell it. And then there was the third option with paying principal and interest from starting in the first year. And it has a much higher debt service payment annually.
I think looking at and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Chair Brown or Jen, if you look at the recommendation language, it doesn't actually specifically call out which route. It just says that we're authorizing that a financial agreement can be entered into. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Brent. So, Dr. Joe, will we come back then and have to have another discussion on which one of those we do, or how would that work?
No, so this resolution actually authorizes Nikki, myself, and you, Dave, to look at the financing options, and we would put those out onto the street. So we'd have a conversation tomorrow and put together our best recommendation, and then that goes through our financing company that then shops for best rates and banks who wish to enter into that agreement.
Can I ask one more question? There was something really interesting said tonight about, I think Karina said this. There's I'm not getting the name correctly here, but there was a company interested in purchasing, very interested, aggressively interested. Can you speak to that just for a second?
I can. I don't want to obligate anybody in a public session, but as part of our working through looking at negotiating a possible purchase, we were also approached about the possibility of purchasing the land pretty soon because of the interest of where it is, the current land that we have now. And so there is some interest by certain parties who have already told us that they at least want to have a first opportunity at doing that. So there has already been some interest there. We know we have some work to do, and of course we need to be on that site until our target date. If we were to move ahead with the purchase of the new land to get us into the new building would be in the fall of 2024. So if we were to sell the land that we're currently on, the school property part, not where the park is, but the school part, we would have to either lease back so we could stay in that building, or if it takes a little bit longer to sell it, then we might be okay. But we have to find a kind of a sweet spot in that. If we sold and then we could lease back and be in that space. But our target date, of course, is to open in fall of 2024, which is why we're seeking to move ahead with the financing now, if that's the board's desire to place the school in the new location.
And Joe, can you remind me why it's urgent that we do this tonight?
Sure. So we, in order to open in that fall of 2024, and going back even further, you have to remember that one of the requirements when you pass a construction bond, is that you need to commit to and have spent the majority of your funds within 3 years, or you reach a place called arbitrage, which we try to stay out of. So the goal of passing a bond is not that you collect money and then you sit around and collect interest on it for years and years. And so there are some laws in effect that say you need to commit this money, you need to get it spent. So it's not to bring it in and to hold on to. And so with looking at the timeline of what it takes to go through what you heard tonight, which is the SD, the schematic design, and then design development, and eventually the construction documents, and then the bidding, and then the construction, that timeline is exceptionally tight. So that's why we had brought it 2 weeks ago to move ahead on those things as we settle out the rest of them, and we'd finished our due diligence on the property. And that was a big part of it, to make sure that our costs would not be higher. In fact, turn out they're going to be lower as we've discussed around the frontage improvements, traffic light things we might have to do, whether sewer and water and other utilities were going to be close enough where they'd have to be resized or not, if those costs would be more. And so we need to move on our schematic design so we can actually meet the timeline of opening in fall of 2024. So we have really pushed this really far. And so that's why we had brought it back. We brought it to you before, and then we're bringing it back today. So to be able to get our financing by, and I want to say the date is November 23rd, if that's correct. Yes, November 23rd, we actually get it on the street tomorrow.
So, Dr. Joe, we would actively pursue this. Whoever it is has some interest in the current property pretty aggressively, then, to try to tie that up. I mean, that would be great. That'd be really good news. Okay.
Right. I think it behooves us to get ourselves as well set as possible, and then consider what our options are for that, and look at the cost of, what is there a cost to lease back and how that kind of fits in. And of course, the earlier you pay this back, the less interest you're paying on your loan. And it's a money savings all around. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any more questions? Anybody else?
So just so I'm clear, the resolution as presented on the agenda does not stipulate which scenario we are going with. So we would have to say which scenario we want you to go with if we want to make approval of this contingent on following that scenario. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I follow. Could you ask that question again?
Okay, so let's say that I support doing this, and this is my position. I support doing this if we go with scenario 3 and we don't leave this huge amount of money sitting out there in year 5. That is essentially a budgetary time bomb if things don't go well with selling the property. So I'm willing to approve this if we go with the 10-year amortization. So if I add language to this resolution under scenario 3, that means that we will only proceed with scenario 3. Is that correct?
So I want to be clear on what scenario 3 is. That the 10-year or the 10-year with the 5-year interest only?
Is the 10-year level debt service.
Okay, so the 10-year level debt service has the highest annual debt service per year.
If you exclude the bullet maturity payment, yes. But if you factor in the bullet maturity payment, it is not.
I understand what you're saying, Brian. I think my concern about that is that when I want the people who will be reaching out to get the best lending scenario and under the best circumstances to have the opportunity to explore various options to ensure that we are getting the best rate. I have a concern, and it might be number 3, right? It might be number 1, it might be number 2. And I have a concern that if we lock that in this resolution, in this motion tonight, I'm sorry, not resolution, in this motion tonight, that we could actually be doing ourselves a disservice in that, because it might not end up being the most beneficial approach.
So, Dr.
Hearing-
Joe, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
how does that work for? Sorry, I interrupted you there.
That's okay. Let me follow up with Brian first, because I think this is important part of this. And it connects with what you just said, Brandy. So these are models, right? So we'll go out and shop these on the street, and we'll see what they come up with. And they may come up with something in between, or they may offer us to look at, maybe it's a 7-year, maybe it's an 8-year, something like that. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're more interested in paying a higher annual debt service in order to try to pay at a lower overall cost to the loan. Is that what you're asking?
Lower overall cost of the loan and not this big balloon payment at the end. Yes.
Okay. The one that's amortized towards June 1st of 2026.
June 1st of 2026.
That's the
June
5-year
1st
bullet.
of 20. Yes, that's the one that has me most concerned. I don't
Okay.
like scenario 2 because it's $200,000 more in interest that we're paying. And if what has been communicated to us is true, that this property is going to sell very quickly, it's essentially a moot point. So we are insuring ourselves against having a big future balloon payment if the sale falls through, at the cost of, for a few months or however long it takes to sell the property, paying a little bit more and paying down some principal.
So my question, Dr. Joe, is if what Brian's point is if we approve this and move forward, then who makes the final decision on, you just said yourself, Nikki, and myself, or we sign off on the whichever one, option 1, 2, or 3. So do we not have an opportunity to come back to the board and ask, Inez, Trevor, Brandy, Renee, Brian, their opinion on that? Or, I mean, how's that go?
I mean,
No.
that's why
Go
we
ahead.
meet with the experts, so that we could ask all of our questions just before this meeting, so that we were ready to move forward.
Yeah, I understand. I just think, this is a $3.4 million. We're not talking about, buying a small item here. This is a big deal.
Yeah. So again, I think that's where and we've only heard from Brian so far, so I think that's one piece. And I think that Brian's point is that he would like to look at us doing the something that pays down with a higher annual debt service, something that also pays down principal at the beginning, right? So looking at that, so that's part of it. I would not put in the resolution because, again, these are models, these are not statements of fact, and so that would tie us to something that may or may not even exist, right, as it goes out on the street. But what I'm hearing is that there's, from one board member so far, that there is interest in paying larger annual debt service to pay down the principal earlier.
How much of debt service is the number 3?
So the one we're currently discussing, the annual debt service, starts at about, the first year would be at about 211,000, and then it goes up to 403,000.
And that comes out of the school budget.
That would come out of our
General
contingency or
fund.
reserves, yes.
Yeah.
That also adds some pressure to sell, but then we'd have to consider the lease back of the property while we use it.
Mhm,
Because remember, we'd be going through the fall of 2024.
mhm.
Yeah, I hear the concerns about having a large payment potentially looming out there, but I think having the impact on our general budget of that carrying that much debt service each year would be detrimental. And I think that the benefit of it, of having paid off the vast majority of the principal prior to the sale of the property, is not actually financially responsible in this scenario because of the fact that it's going to impact our general budget, our annual general budget so heavily. But I think this discussion is great. And I think it brings up the exact, it illustrates exactly what we're saying, and that there needs to be some flexibility on the approach at this point. And I think that the least amount of impact on the general budget until the sale of that property is my personal preference.
So
I
Randy, which one is that for you then?
Well, it's whatever comes up as the best option, right? We don't know. These are just scenarios, right? So whatever in the exploring, whatever comes back as the best option, certainly that kind of falls under those guidelines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I move that the Newberg School Board approve the resolution as stated.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? So Dr. Joe, again, after going out for this, the person that's kind of being an agent or whatever, working for us on the financial part, we'll look at options 1, 2, and 3 and come back with the best scenarios they're finding out on the market right now. And they'll come back to you, Nikki Fowler and myself. Is that how that would work?
We'll need to go out with no more than 2 options. So I think that's something that we also, when we spoke with our consultants, that going out with 3 can make it less desirable for lenders. And so what we're trying to do is figure out if we're looking at 2 kinds of options, that's what that would be. And then they would putting it on the street and bring us back some options for us to look at. I mean, they'll find the best price, best debt service ratio, and then we'll look at it from there.
And when you say bring it back to us, this is the last time the board will deal with it, correct? You're not going to
Correct.
go get a loan and then bring it back to us.
No, that's correct.
Well, I feel that I trust. I know it's a large amount of money, but it's an element of trust to Nikki and Joe and to Dave to do what's best. And considering the work they've done on the budget and how desperate we were when Joe started this job, and how we're sitting now, and I appreciate all the work and the thoughtfulness and the trying to make every dime count. And I have total faith in this working out. That will be a beautiful building for our students.
So Joe, one question: if we get to the point, are we going to have a balloon payment on this, or are we paying off principal? I guess you have to decide that based on the 2 scenarios.
Right.
If we have a balloon payment, my question is, if the property doesn't sell, what's the impact to the school district?
Sure. You have 2 options. One, you could refinance at that point. So let's say it gets down to year 4. It looks like we're not going to be able to sell the property, or it's taking longer than we thought. We can restructure that loan to extend, and so to continue that on. Or number 2, we could just pay the balloon payment all at once, and that would just depend upon where we felt comfortable at that point. So we're talking about 4 years down the road. is a decision to either refinance to go a little bit further, or for us to go ahead and just pay it off at that point. So those would be, those would be your options. There'd be options in any of these, but by having that, one of the values of having the lower annual debt service is that you are not impacting the general fund as much. And if you get down to sometime in 2025 and decide that we need to restructure this because we're not able to sell the property, then we would just refinance and move ahead on that one. So that's one of your options. You basically either have a refi or just pay off the full debt at that point.
The problem with that is that interest rates could be considerably higher at that point.
They could be, yes.
So if we looked at that scenario and we used today's numbers, if we had to pay off the debt today, 3.5 million, how does that affect us?
Well, it comes out of our ending fund balance.
Okay, but what would that look like this year, and would it affect next year?
I'll let Nikki speak a little bit to this, but it really wouldn't affect that much. I think one of the things when you do budgeting and you look long term is you have to consider that you don't have all the answers to how many students are enrolled, and what the state budget is, and whether our SIA continues to be fully funded. Those other pieces that come into play. That's we've received these other federal funds that we've used to extend some of these as well. So it would be, I don't think it would be best for us to be doing a purchase of it at this time, even though we have a relatively healthy ending fund balance. We have some things we have to take care of as we go into the next few years for a glide path, as we spoke about before when we were discussing SIA and the ESSER funds several months ago when we were working on those. And Nikki, I don't know if you want to give further detail on what the 3.5 would look like in the current budget.
Right. No, I agree with you, Joe. I mean, if you're looking at, if we have a balloon payment out there in a few years, we would just be keeping an eye on our ending fund balance, make sure we have the capacity there by that point, just in case. If we make a deal before then, we'll be, we can just continue budgeting and planning like we always have. But once this is put out there, we'll know that that is a goal that we need to be prepared for. And so that'll be part of our planning process from year to year in maintaining the ending fund balance to be able to take care of that.
And to give an idea of perspective of the possibility of that, we were at an ending fund balance of less than 500,000 in 2017, and by 2021, Nikki could give you the exact number. We had been able to build that to 9 to 10 million. So as Nikki's saying, there's plenty of time frame in the structure of the first one to make sure that there is enough ending fund balance to cover that.
So Nikki, with that said, moving forward, I mean, I remember where we were at, and I know where we're at now. So moving through this process, unless the school sold to this people interested sooner, then we would really stay the course on making sure our ending fund balance is staying way high to cover something worst case, like if economy goes down, interest rates are 3 or 4 times higher than they are now, we'd be able to handle that at that time.
Right. I mean, just as every year with the budget process, we'll be looking at all those pieces, enrollment being the big piece, SSF. And that's, we're going to be starting our budget process early this year. Will be, January, February, we're going to be starting to do that work. But yeah, just like any other large payment or any other planning that we do, we want to take a few years to build that up. And we'll just keep an eye out there. Whether it's the 5-year with the balloon payment or the 10-year with principal payments starting in 5-year. Both of those do not have an early payoff penalty. So they're both safer as far as a lower payment debt service in those first several years. So that's real manageable in that way. And if we sell early, we can pay off early without any penalty. So it's a nice option. And like we spoke about before, if we did the 5-year with the balloon, there's always the option to refinance at that point as a last ditch effort. If for some reason the enrollment continues to drop and all those sorts of things. But our goal would be to be looking ahead like we have been, watching the enrollment and just keeping that ending fund balance out there to help cover this.
Is there a rubric out there or something from the state for a district our size that how much an ending fund balance is like not healthy, which we were at in 2017 to where we're at now? I mean, are we above healthy or are we just middle of the road? I mean, what's kind of the ideal thing for Newberg?
Well, I think you did a lot of work around this prior to my time, and you set the goal, you know, with the two pieces to it at about 7%. And that's 7% of your revenue of the general fund is what it looks at. So it doesn't look at all your grant funding and all of that in that process. You know, you can always look at bumping that up. I would probably be a little more comfortable if that was up a little bit, just because I'm paranoid and I like to be safer. But 7 is definitely a good number, and it was a great goal for the board to get to. But certainly looking ahead, bumping that up a little bit because times get more expensive. So that ending fund balance will have to be a bit bigger to keep us in a safe place.
Nikki, what's our percentage now?
We budgeted at the minimum. We've been coming in ahead of that because typically, you know, we'll have savings throughout the year. Our goal is not to spend down every single line. And so what we have savings at the end of every year. Right now, as far as the cash flow that I've been presenting, we're around the $10 to $11 million mark as an estimate at this point. But we're still very early in the year also. So.
Okay. No, thank you. That's a good answer. Appreciate it.
Nikki, I have a couple questions. You mentioned the no payoff penalty for scenarios 1 and 2. Is there an early payoff penalty for scenario 3? You're muted, Nikki.
Oops, I clicked it. It didn't quite work for me. So no, there's not an early penalty payment for that one as well. Like Brandy stated, or Rebecca, I can't remember for sure. The biggest concern with those are the impact on the general fund. Because if you're looking at 400,000 that we'd be pushing for to debt service, you're looking at, you know, 3 teaching positions, many EA positions. If you directly correlate it to staffing, which most of our budget is. So any of those big ticket items, we need to be looking at the impact.
But we're very confident that the property will sell, so that won't actually come into play, right?
Well, we would be paying in those first several years. So we might be confident that it's going to sell, but is the sale going to be final in year 3 after we open or final in year 4? We'll still be on the hook for year 1 and 2 and 3 possibly. So that's what we're looking at. We don't, and even if we made a deal earlier, we'd be still looking at leasing back and paying for the property in some manner. I don't know what those numbers would look like. So that would be my concern, is having to have that cash on hand to make those payments.
And then my other question is, what would our ending fund balance have been if these last 2 years hadn't been hold harmless?
If they would have what?
Hadn't been hold harmless years?
You know, I don't have that calculated right now. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how that would have impact the current year rolling into this year. Prior to that, our enrollment was pretty stable, so it didn't impact us that much. This year going into next year, it does look like we're down some. But then again, it's early in the year, and with COVID and everything, it's hard to guess how much we're going to rebound by the end of the year.
But Nikki, in the hold harmless situation, isn't that always well known in the budgeting process? Because as you enter the budgeting process, you know what the current level would be, and so you can budget on what you know is going to be the lowest amount for next year's budget, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah, because we would know what our ending enrollment is for the current year, aside from reconciling with other school districts. So it takes like 9 months to reconcile, but we should have a pretty close estimate as where we're going to end up when we're budgeting the next year. And we're always looking at that.
Okay. How's everybody doing on your questions? Everybody doing pretty good there? Okay. Dr. Joe, anything to add to that?
No, these are complicated decisions. I hope you know that as we go forward in each one of these, that's something that keeping the eye on the budget, something when I was hired 4 years ago, coming into, I think it was projected to be at $139,000 ending fund balance and slashing of 60 jobs. And I think we've come back very well from those. And I appreciated Rebecca's comments. We've been done a lot of work, and doing this is not something that we take lightly. This is a large dollar amount, yes, and we would not bring it forward if we didn't think that it was the right thing for us to do for the future place for this building, the right location. Again, we've done the due diligence on these. We've looked at the master plan for the Riverside area. We know that where the growth is coming in, we think we should to move ahead on this. It makes it easier, makes it safer for kids, and keeps our park whole in Dundee. And we think it's the right move. And I think throughout these last few years of trying to work through the details of getting to this point, we've always kept an eye on the budget and on the safety of the budget, because that budget means jobs, and people who come and work for us have families and have lives. We want to make sure that we take care of those too. So those are important considerations for us every time we look at this stuff. And so we don't come to you with this lightly, and we think we've done all of our best work to get to this point. And so that's why we wanted to come forward with this and present you with the opportunity for us to see what you think and move ahead with the purchase if you so choose, if that's the will of the board.
Dr. Joe, I had something I'd like to add to that. If it's all right. I think I've always lived here for as long as I have. I think, challenging our district staff, the board is, this would be an opportunity to come back to build the trust in the community. In the past, we haven't always done what everybody in the community liked with Old Central and Old Rennie. And, there's always two sides to everything here, but if it moves forward, we have an opportunity to show that the schools can do something really, really well. And it shows that, if this is a building that's built for today, not 30 years ago, if we build something that really shows people how education can be, and not what it's, been from a brick and mortar standpoint, that it's really creative. I just think that, people were really upset about Old Rennie and Central. Central's turned into the cultural center, and it took almost 25 years. So again, I just think that it's an opportunity to, I live 3 blocks from where the school is going to be built for 12 years. So I can't imagine what it would have been like at that time to have a building like this down there, but it's a huge responsibility to do it the right way, not in a way that's because a lot of people they think government school district will just do an okay job on this thing. So
well, yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's why when you ask the voters for their money and you make a bond promise for that money, you owe it to them to do the best job possible. And I think that's, through all these challenging times, we've spoken a little bit about cost escalation and impacts of COVID on the supply chain and what that looks like for timelines and things like that. All of those things are just factors, but the real goal is that you're building the best place, not just for the kids you have today, but for 10 and 20 and 50 and 60 years. These buildings outlast all of us on the screen. I don't want to make that sound too dark, but these buildings will outlive us. And it's important that we do the best we can for the kids we can't even imagine. And that's, I think we have chosen exceptionally well in our architects, in our project managers, and in our construction firm. And that's also a huge amount of work to make sure you choose the right people who can guide you to get to this right place. And I would agree with you. I do think it's about trust. I do think that people need to see that when they vote with their dollars, that they should get something that they're asking for, that they're getting a high return on their dollar and on their investment. And those tax dollars that they committed to, those are their dollars to be invested in their community. And I'm really, I'm humbled that they passed this bond, and I'm excited for the opportunity for us to, not just this school, but every school gets something in this bond. And, you know, the work that's happening that will happen at the high school and at Edwards, those are big projects, but it's also at every other school. There are things that will create improvements, you know, along the way. Not all of them will be obvious, but I think in our last memo, you got to see a big HVAC, you know, monster that nobody really gets to see, right? It sits up on the roof or sits in a cage, but it's something that makes the place comfortable for students. So yeah, I would agree. And I don't think a big CMU box is the right way to build a new school. And we talked earlier today about, you know, right sizing gymnasiums, because they're not just the kids, it's also our public who uses them, you know, afterwards, and it's tournaments and it's all the rest of the stuff that we want to make sure that the facilities we build can host the activities that we imagine now and the ones we have no idea that will come in the future. And so I don't want to belabor this too much more. I know we have a lot of work to do in the work session, but this is an awesome responsibility and we do not take it lightly.
Well,
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We have a motion and a second. Is that correct?
we do. Director Pyros made that motion. I believe Director Inez seconded that.
I move that we amend the motion to stipulate that the financing will be sought under scenario 3, the 10-year amortization level debt service.
Are you making a motion there?
Yeah, I made a motion. You need to call for a second.
Is there a second on that? I do not hear a second on that. All right, so we're back to our original motion then. Any further discussion? Director Pyros, can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
Could you repeat your motion there? Is that okay? Or do you want me to do it for you?
I move that the Newberg School Board approve the resolution as written.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready for a vote, you guys. Any more discussion? I know it's a big deal.
Hey, Chair Brown, can you read that motion just so that
You betcha.
we're all clear?
Move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors adopt resolution 2021 to 2004, a resolution authorizing a full faith and credit borrowing in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $3.45 million in related matters. That's how it's written.
Okay, thank you.
No, thanks. So again, we have that motion. We have a second. Is everybody ready to vote? Everybody good? Okay. All those in favor of this motion to move forward, raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. So I've got those in favor is Director Pinner, Brown, DeHart, Pena, Pyros, and Powell. Did I see the hand there, Powell? No? Yes, I did. And those, if you don't approve the motion, raise your hand. And opposed is Director Shannon. Motion passes 6-1. Appreciate all the conversation. I'm sure it won't be the last conversation we have about this thing going forward. So thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. Okay, we're moving on. Our next one up is something that's kind of exciting for a change. We get to go positive here for a while. We don't have to talk about dollars. So Nikki, you have to be quiet now. This is something that directors Powell, Pena, and myself are on the personnel committee. This is something that we haven't done since I've been on the board. It's because of COVID and all those kind of crazy things. It's just a new time. But I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. It's appointing student representatives to the board. The board advertised and solicited applicants for student representatives to the board of directors in May of 2021 and received 4 applications by the deadline on June 17th, 2021. So we're a bit behind schedule, but there's been a lot of reasons for that. The Personnel Committee met on September 23rd, 2021 to discuss the roles, process, and interviewing students. The committee met again on October 7th and October 13th, 2021, and discussed student interviews and select students to recommend to the board for appointment. We're not using names tonight. We just have numbers. So as everybody understands the reason for that. The Personnel Committee recommends the board appoint 2 candidates, applicant 1 and applicant 3, to serve in the positions from the 4 that applied and interviewed. The students appointed to the positions will be invited to the November 9th, 2021 board meeting to take their oaths of office and begin their term. Just so you know, you guys, we are quite a ways behind schedule on this. And so we'll do this now, and then we'll have to do this, I believe, Jennifer, if we thought about that, I think we talked about that before. We're looking at spring and May. We should be doing this next year, right? For next year?
Yeah, I think that's usually when you do it, yes.
Yeah, so we're, does everybody understand the student representatives? Any questions on that so far?
No,
Okay.
I'd like to move to see the Newberg School Board to approve all 4 students who registered, who were interviewed to be accepted as student representatives to the board.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
The reason I would like to see all 4 students is I was on the board when we had 3 students. And at times there were only 1 student at the meeting because of band concerts or sporting events or homework. They're not, they are very respectful. It's a learning opportunity. And they also went through a very strenuous application process, more strenuous than I think some of the members who have been elected to the board, to fill out an essay and get references and all that. And I think a student, the 4 student voices are important. I would like to honor their applications and that they tried out for the position. And I respect the board, the committee's choice, but I would really like to see 4 students on the board. They don't take up, they're very respectful. They're there to listen, and they're only here for 8 months. So it would also give the 3 who aren't, there's 1 senior, 2 juniors, and 1 sophomore. It would give the 3 a chance to see, do they want to continue another year serving the board? So I think it would build trust from the students that we are willing to expand our committee to welcome 4 members.
And if I may, why I second it, I know we discussed it in the personnel committee. You know, we were going back and forth with it, whether it was 1 student, 2 students, 3, 4. But as you know, time has passed, and you mentioned we are starting late because this is something that is typically done in the spring, but understanding with COVID and everything, we are a little behind. So I think that the more time I've had to think about it, I do feel like the 4 deserve an opportunity to be a voice for students. And that is why I second it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Chair Brown, I'm looking through our policies. What policy, does anybody know what policy governs the student reps?
Yeah, we've got policy BCBA. And we have policy BCBA with -AR on that.
Trevor, I think it's actually in the board packet. If you're following along in the board packet, it's included in there.
Yeah, I was looking through that. I thought that it said that our policy limited us to 2. Is that not the case?
No, currently, BCBA section and length of term, up to 3 student representatives to the board may apply to and be selected to serve the board.
And does it say juniors and seniors only?
No, it does not. I'm just looking over it really quick. It does not say the year of the student, the class is necessary. It does say student representatives to the board shall serve a 1-year term from July 1st to June 30th. So obviously we're already into that, as has been stated.
However, they are invited to reapply if so they choose, right?
Right.
So I also served on the board in the past when we had student representatives, and I'm really glad to see it coming back because it really does offer us more of a perspective. The students generally give comments. I forget the order. It was either before or after board comments. And it was great just to hear updates on what they're doing and what their experiences are in our school buildings. And then my experience was also that during conversations, they would also, advise the board, interject that student representative or that student perspective, which again, in the moment can be incredibly helpful. We updated this policy to include 3 student reps because we had a situation similar to this a couple of years ago in which we had 3 amazing candidates and we chose all of them. And it was really good that we did because it ended up, I believe 2 were seniors, and also because like Director Pyro stated, soccer schedules or play schedules or, demands of homework or traveling can sometimes take students away. And I think under these circumstances, I support 4 as well, because exactly everything we've been talking about, we know that our students are facing a challenging, reality in our buildings at this point due to so many factors out of their control. And I think that if we're able to have them have that peer support amongst each other, it's going to be a lot more beneficial for them and positive for their experience as well. I honestly don't see a downside to having 4. And I think, as hopefully the theme of this meeting is building trust, right? So I think it would be a great sort of olive branch to the students to say, listen, we value you, we want you at the table, and we want to hear your perspective.
Well, doing some checking out there, I think, the average school boards that do allow student reps, what I came across was they had 1 or 2. And that's why we settled on the 2, just so everybody knows the context of why 2 is picked. I would just say from my perspective, with everything we've had going on, I probably would have picked 1, but we settled, the personnel committee selected 2 coming out of that. And so I would stay with what we've suggested from personnel. So any comments from somebody that hasn't spoken yet? Go ahead.
Dave, can I ask you to just clarify a little bit more on that? What was your reasoning behind initially only wanting 1?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's like when I look at the student leadership, I was around the high school, site councils, all the coaching, picking leaders and that kind of stuff. We had 4 people apply. I thought 2 were really well suited. And I thought the other 2 were, that's why they finished where they did, for me. And I think 2 helps us, get a student voice in there. And so, yeah, I just think getting, we could change this around next year, have long discussions about how we get more student representation at the school level. But we've never really sat back and listened to the site councils, when students are on there. I've served on that many times with students. The board never talked to us. When you talk about the student leaders, and what's going on around school. I mean, I think we can bring them in and have a, part of a work session where they're actually getting, peppered with questions, and we can talk to them then. So I still, I like 2 just because we have 2 really solid candidates and they'll have more of an opportunity to share. So I think 2 is like I said, most school districts have 1 or 2, if they have any at all. Not everybody does it. I like having the voice, but again, I'd stick with, I would have picked 1, but I'll go with 2. So.
And just to clarify,
I'm going to go around everybody first. Director
Sure.
Shannon or Powell, can you go next? And then we'll go back around. Director Pena. Director Shannon.
I'm probably just going to defer to the recommendation of the Personnel Committee.
Director Powell.
Yes, I just want to stick with what we decided.
Okay, back there. Director Pena, I know you had another comment, so we keep going on this. Go.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the two that we selected as a recommendation from us as a personnel committee were kind of where they fell in line versus the other two students. And I just want to clarify that my scores were different, and both of the students selected were not necessarily my top two student choices.
I think one was and one wasn't, right? Right. Okay. Okay. Anybody else there? Everybody's gotten a chance to speak once. We're going around again, or I would like to say thank you to Board Secretary Jennifer Nelson, because she put a lot of work into this. Thank you so much. She put all this packet together and had to schedule everything. And so Jennifer, good job on this.
Thank you. And Chair Brown, I actually was just turning on my microphone because I do need to interject here. As policy is stated now, you can only select 3. So if it is that the board's will is to select 4 students, you would also need to make a change to the policy within this meeting in order to do that. So policy has to be changed in order to adhere to it in what motion we're making tonight. So if you would like, if it is the board's will to have 4, you will also need to make a motion tonight to change the policy to allow for 4 students.
Got it. Thank you.
Before you do that.
Well, I think before we get to that, I think we've got our motion from Director Pyro, second by Director Pena. I think we can go ahead and vote. And then if we're at that point on that one, Jennifer, then we would have to do that. So if you are in favor of what the Personnel Committee recommended was 2 student reps, I believe on our
Director Brown, I think you need to take Director Pyros's motion first.
Yeah.
I don't believe anyone's made a motion to accept the Personnel Committee's recommendation.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Director Pyros's motion is to accept all 4, seconded by Director Pena. If you're in favor of that, please raise your hand. And that is in favor of 3. That is Directors Pinner, Pyros, and Pena. If you're opposed to that, please raise your hand. Directors Brown, Shannon, DeHart, and Powell. So motion fails 3-4. Back to the original personnel one. The recommendation from the Personnel Committee is to take 2. That would be applicants 1 and 3 to serve in positions for the school year. So if you are in favor of that, please raise your hand.
We need a motion.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors appoint applicant 1 and applicant 3 to serve as student representatives to the board for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, if you are in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. We are at 7-0. There we go.
I would like to say something to the 2 applicants who didn't get appointed to please stay active and try again next year. We appreciate your involvement.
And board, I would like to announce that we were doing this by applicant numbers, but you have selected to appoint Maddie Klink and Rowan Myers to the board as students representatives, and they will be attending or invited to attend our meeting on the 9th of November to take their oath of office.
Awesome. Jennifer, will we have like a written oath like we have for the board for those students?
Yes.
Okay. And then it looks like we're going to be in Zoom. We'll see how that pans out. So, okay, moving on to the next one. We are in new business number B, Division 22 assurances, and it's Greg Costello.
Hello, directors. Thanks for the chance to present this. There actually is not a lot to describe about the individual ones because, as stated in the packet, we are in compliance on all of these except for one. And so what I will talk about first is what these Division 22 assurances are, and then what the process is that we go through to verify this. So Division 22 is a part of the Oregon State Code. That's the law that applies to all public education in K through 12, and it addresses all kinds of things. Number of days in school, curriculum, all kinds of policies to make sure that we adhere to the law for all of these different areas. And each year, we as a district are required to do an in-depth look and make sure that we are meeting all of the requirements by law, present that in public to the board, and then when you acknowledge receipt of this report tonight, we will then put it on our website so that the public is able to see that as well. I emailed today. I realized today that the packet did not keep the links live in the presentation, the links that went directly to the specific statutes that each category of assurance applies to. So I sent all board members a different version of that this afternoon so that you can feel free to do what we did, which is you click that link and you see the part of the law that is requiring all of these areas, and then we talk to the folks who are responsible for each of those areas and make sure that they are following all of those state laws. And so the Division 22 assurances is us as the administration of the district saying to the board and to the public, we assure you that we are meeting all of these state requirements and that we have done a review of those to make those happen. Last year, this was a much shorter process because the Oregon Department of Education waived all of the requirements other than 17 specific ones. This year, almost all of them are back. There are only 7 that are waived, and you can see those listed specifically, and they have to do around things like state testing, which was postponed because of the pandemic. So as I said, we are in compliance on every single one of them with the exception of purchasing curriculum in the time allotment that the state stipulates for each district. And this has been an issue for our district for many years, where previous administrations made different choices about curriculum and got us off schedule. And we have done a lot of work, specifically Dr. Derek Brown has done a lot of work over the last several years, as he's reported to you, of bringing together all of our teachers in the different curriculum areas and looking at the standards, making sure those standards are agreed upon and leveled for each grade, and then looking for curriculum recommendations that fit with those. And so we have remapped a schedule for those curriculum adoptions that matches what the state is requiring on their time frame. And so for the last several years, as we've submitted to the state that we are out of compliance with this, we have said, here's our remedy, here's our plan for curriculum adoptions to get back into compliance. And that remedy has been approved 2 years ago by ODE, and we are exactly on schedule with following that. So what we report to the state and to the public on that specific one is that we are following the compliance, let me get the exact language here. We are implementing an approved corrective action by the by the Oregon Department of Education. So that's the report, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have on this.
I guess, Greg, the one I had is, the curriculum one, pops up. I think you guys have spoken to that, in the past, so I kind of get why we're at where we're at. But, since we have a pretty good ending fund balance and stuff like that, it's kind of a big deal. Can we be kind of aggressive on that and get the curriculum caught up for our instructors and our kids?
We are being as aggressive as is prudent because it's much more than just going out and purchasing curriculum. Dr. Brown's made several presentations to the board over the last several years talking about the whole process of curriculum adoption, that the best part of it is not necessarily what you purchase, but is the process of bringing your teachers together and looking at the standards, which is the actual thing that we are responsible to teach to our students. So you look at the educational standards that the state requires and make a plan so that K through 12, you're mapping out what those standards are and what is going to be taught in each grade, how to hand that off to each other as the grades work through, and then go out and look for a curriculum that matches those. One of the things that Dr. Brown has done is, as he's worked on this schedule with ODE, is made an adjustment to his original schedule for curriculum. And this gives an answer to why we don't want to do this too fast. I don't remember the specifics. He may be able to jump in, but we were going to do reading or language arts before science, or maybe science before language arts, and we chose to reverse those in the years we were addressing them because ODE told us they were going to be changing the standards in a certain year. So we wanted to make sure that we were not adopting a curriculum a year before ODE was going to change the standards and we weren't going to match up. So that's the primary answer to your question of why we just don't do it all immediately right now. It's not just a question of going out and buying the curriculum, but it's making sure that our teachers know what the standards are and have a plan to address them, and that we are following the schedule that the state is letting us know about updating the standards so that we don't purchase curriculum that is immediately out of date.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to, sorry, I was going to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'll recommend, move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors acknowledge receipt of this report on Division 22 compliance for the 2020-21 school year.
A second.
I don't know who got in there first. Anybody got a clear one on that one?
I have Director Pyrus.
Okay, got it. Thanks, you guys. Okay, any more discussion? So if you're in favor of that motion from Director Pinner, please raise your hand. And that passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We'll be sure and get it up on the website tomorrow. Thank you.
The handout was really good, though. I like that was easy to read through. So if we click on like rule and title, like on those numbers in there, we can get right to that and look at that more detailed, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the packet didn't do that. My conversion to PDF didn't work to bring the links across, but the thing that I sent to you this afternoon, you can just click right on those links and you can directly read the law that applies to that area.
Yeah, no, that was really good. Thank you. That was super easy. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and then we're moving on. So that's new business item B. We're done. And so now we're back to board number C, the statement of the board decision on complaint 091621. Again, remember, no names are to be held or to be talked about. The decision is right now to uphold the district's decision or to overturn. You know, for me, I felt like we were pretty incomplete on the information. So I know how, you know, I heard what everybody said there. So again, it's if we uphold, we're saying that we agree with what the district already did in this complaint process. The first time at least in my time, that we've ever had something to go to this level. So it's a little bit new to everybody. If we agree to overturn, that means there'll have to be further information gathered. So I think the first one we'll vote on is if you want to.
Well, we have to have a motion.
Yeah, no, I know. You know, so again, if everybody's clear on the upholding part of it, so you just get the terminology down.
So Dave, sorry, there's no motion. Remember, this is the straw poll of members if choosing to uphold it or not, but there's no motion attached to it.
And we did talk about that earlier, didn't we, on that one? So, yeah. So if you are voting to uphold, please raise your hand. We have 3. We have directors Pena, Pyros, and Pinner.
I move to table.
And why?
Well, like you said, you know, we kind of, because of time constraints, ran out of time. So I think I'd like us to gather a little more information before we move to uphold or overturn.
But do you need to you can table it, but do you need to make a motion to direct a directive to the superintendent to gather specific questions?
I think we gathered those in the session we had before.
Okay, so we don't have to be specific to you now.
No, I
And
think we
can probably
got those.
send additional questions by email, I'd assume.
Okay. So if you raise your hand if you're voting to overturn.
I didn't.
Right.
We need a second.
No, we're
My
not.
motion is to table, Dave.
Oh, you already had that one. You were going to stick with that? All right. We have a motion to table that. Any second on that?
So what's the difference between tabling it and overturning it? Because if you overturn it, wouldn't we be getting that information and then looking at this again?
Well, my understanding is overturning it would overrule the superintendent. And I'm not entirely clear what even happens if we do that. So at the very least, I'd like to know what the consequences of us voting are.
Oh,
Well, and so there was a consequence for this employee, and my understanding is if we vote to overturn it, we are voting to overturn that consequence. Does that make sense?
That is correct.
And then what?
And then the complaint is done.
no, but what
It
about
doesn't-
the other?
No, that doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, I'm just letting you know my understanding of it. We are not in an investigatory body. We are purely a judicial body. So we are, the only thing on the table right now is voting to either uphold the district's decision pertaining to this employee, or to oppose the district's decision. We're not voting on making like some sort of investigation or going further into this. We have like those two options.
So if we oppose it, then we can get more information.
It's not my understanding.
So hence my move to table.
Okay, because I would like more information.
Right,
So I need a
but I
second.
don't know that we're clear on if we can even get more information, since this is a personnel issue. I'm not clear on that.
I called OSBA yesterday and talked to them directly about this with Vince Adams and Director Jim Green. And, he told me, the process here. So if we do table or overturn, it's at the board level now. So then we would go back and whatever questions we have to get them answered so we can end this thing and get done with it. So we, by tabling it, we have to move back, and I'm assuming Dr. Joe put this in Director Brown's desk, so we would have to go back to him with questions to say that didn't get answered tonight. So that's where we're at.
So if we table this, does that give a directive to Dr. Morlock to address, to ask those questions that we've raised in the executive meeting?
How would you
Not
interpret
in and of itself.
We took notes during that time period to understand more of the perspective. And we can certainly follow up with each of you to make sure that we have the things that you'd like to know more about.
So that by just tabling that will be suffice for you?
Yeah. Yep.
Second.
Okay, those in favor of tabling this and getting more information, please raise your hand. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 directors: DeHart, Shannon, Powell, and Brown. If you do not favor that, if you want to uphold the district's position, please raise your hand.
That's not, it's to
No,
just vote
no.
down the motion to table.
What's that?
They're not voting to uphold it. They're going to vote down the motion to table.
All right, if you're voting to turn down that motion, then raise your hand. That is Directors Pena, Penner, and Pyros. So the motion tabled is 4-3. So Dr. Joe, I'll chat with you tomorrow. We can go a little farther on that.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Anybody need a break there? I know we got a little bit more time here. It's 8:34 and we are, oh yeah, we're 37 minutes behind schedule, but we got stuff done there. So we're back into the working session discussions now. So is everybody good to go a little bit longer here, or does anybody need a break?
Take a 5-minute break.
Deal. So it is, Jennifer, I got 8:35 now, so 8:40. Everybody back? So
Director Brown, I'd also suggest that we maybe have a discussion about the feasibility of getting to all of these all of these work session discussions in the time allotted, but we can figure that out when we get back.
yeah, I agree. We're a little bit behind now.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
It's just you and me, Rebecca.
Okey doke.
Dave joined us. Okay. I thought we could have a 2-person party there for a minute. Although
How
it
many
was
people are on the Zoom meeting?
right now, there's 116. I think it was up to like 130 at one point. that I
Okay,
saw.
Yeah, 96 of them are attendees and then 20 panelists.
oh, wow.
Where do you see that number at, you guys?
So you know where your mute and video buttons are? At the bottom of the screen?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, participants. And then if you, yeah, you can see the number right there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
And do we have translators tonight?
Yes, we do have 2 translators.
Yeah,
Okay, we're just missing Renee. She'll be back here in a second, I think, and we've got Dr. Joe. There's Renee, so we're ready to go here. Brandy made a good point, you guys. We're definitely behind schedule there with, everything we got out of executive sessions late. So I think what I'd like to challenge everybody here is let's see how quickly we can go. Maybe choose your words. If you've ever done team building with me, I put limits on how long people can talk sometimes. You can get a lot talked about in a hurry. So that's my challenge. I know I can't make you guys be quiet on some of this. Some of these issues are really important. So they're all important. So the first one, I talked to Dr. Joe about this one. If we can keep these to a couple minutes apiece, we can fly right through these. Does that make sense, you guys? That's kind of the idea of the work session anyway, is just to get this stuff out there. We're not voting on anything. We're just talking about these things. So the first one is discuss policy GBG, implementation and complaint process. Dr. Joe and I had a chat about this the other day, and I asked Dr. Joe just to make some comments about it. So here we go.
So just a quick overview for everyone. One of the questions that has come forward is, when does the policy go into implementation? And of course, upon a vote, it is therefore policy. We had some confusion around people waiting for administrative regulations. We've informed those people they don't actually need to wait for those. We have discovered that the policy has the needed things that we required to move forward. And part of that, of course, is the complaint procedure. So we have explained to a few people that it is a complaint-driven process, and we do have board policy around complaints. So we've instructed the people who have directly contacted us to go through that process. So those are, we've had a couple of them start, and so those eventually will either be solved at a lower level or may end up at the board level. So one of the decisions when you develop the policy was to use the district's regular complaint procedure, which is on our website, and we do explain to people about those. So I think people assume that immediately things would be different, but because this is a complaint procedure, complaint-driven process, we have to wait for complaints to come. We're waiting for complaints to come in. I think the challenge in our implementation or enforcement is around the specific language about what is considered political and what is not considered political, or quasi-political, I'm sorry, I lost track of my train of thought. Political, quasi-political, or anything that might be controversial.
Yeah.
I think the challenge for us was to decide if you have students on more than one side of said issue and what that would look like. So we do have people who have decided to come forward with some of those complaints. Although we prefer them to talk directly with the staff member, that may be uncomfortable for folks. So we've let them jump to level 2 in those situations. They can talk directly to their building administrator or that person's supervisor, and then it moves forward. So Rebecca, do you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Oh, all right.
And Joe, at each step of the process there, how long does the administrator have to respond? How long do you have to respond?
So it depends on the initial step is a 5-day, and then in between each one of those, it's a 10-day space. We try not to go through the full 10. It's been, we have some other things that are relatively busy, but we try to do within step 1, within 5 working days of meeting with that employee. They need to work through so if the complainant doesn't, if they decide to go with level 1, they talk with somebody about that and it doesn't get resolved, they bring it to the building administrator. They have 10 working days after receiving that complaint to deal with it. We don't generally take all 10, but principals are of course busy. And then if within 5 days of that process, within that, if they wish to move it forward. So if they're unhappy with the building administrator or the person's supervisor's decision, then they have 5 days from that time to move that to the next level, which could take up to 10 days. Again, we try not to do the full 10 days. And then after they receive the response either from the next level, that would be from either myself or from Dr. Brown, they would have 5 days then from that time to notify the board that they would like to take the complaint to the board level if they do not agree with the disposition of the complaint. And then we would have to set up a time, and the board has 20 days from the close of the hearing, whenever that hearing would be scheduled, to make a decision and then to render that. And that, of course, the board's decision on that is final.
Thank you.
So Dr. Joe, if that is the case, then we were talking about this other day. So let's say the building administrator gets a complaint about a staff member wearing something that's in the policy and or hanging something in their room, and they go to that instructor and say it has to go, then what?
Who's they that goes to the instructor?
The administrator.
Okay, so the administrator would actually check with the staff member, whoever that is, have a conversation. They would go through, it's not a deep investigation, but an investigation of the complaint, because the complaint has to be written. That comes to the building administrator. And then they need to evaluate the evidence and render a decision within 10 working days of receiving the complaint, right? So they would go talk to them. Is this political or not political? They render a statement, usually via email, of course, or, attached letter, what have you. So that's, and then we go from there. Now, if the principal or supervisor decides that it is political, let's say they've got if we were back in the old days, it would be a Nixon button. And they would say, well, that one's that one is either in violation of the Hatch Act or that is a political statement, then they'd be asked to remove it at that time.
So if they're asked to remove that, then can they come back the next day and put it on again and go through the whole process again?
No, not if it's the same thing. If they were put it back on, no.
But they could go
What
down.
about the teacher in the room next to him?
Well, again, it's a complaint-driven process, and I think that that's part of the challenge in all this, is to say if you mark one, is it exactly the same? Is it slightly different? Is it a different setup? I mean, I think each one of those is, and that's why we have this complaint process in place, because each person's going to see these as different. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges. So to say that just one is exactly that one, does that cover all permutations of that same one? Right? If it's in a different font, if it's in a different style, if it's different wording, sometimes you'll make up those things. So
when we did the all students belong, and they said no Ku Klux Klan, or was what was it, the
SWATs,
Confederate flag.
Confederate flag, and what was it?
the noose.
The noose. So let's say in that one, does that cover all nooses, or is that just a noose with a different kind of rope? If it covers different fonts, it seems to me that would have covered that somebody cannot have a shirt with a swastika on it, no matter how it's drawn, or whatever. Wouldn't that be the process?
Dave, I think the difference is that's not a complaint-driven policy. That policy doesn't say if you see a noose or a swastika or a Confederate flag, you make a complaint and go through the process. That is just, these symbols are not allowed. And so because of the document that was adopted by the board is a complaint-driven process, that's why it's different. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Except
Hey,
the policy clearly states that you can't have these symbols in the area where the teacher is performing their official duties. It's not, the complaint is a mechanism for enforcement of it, but the idea that you're going to decide this sign is political, but then only for that particular teacher in that particular classroom, and the teacher next door has the same sign, but that's okay because it hasn't been complained about yet, is ridiculous.
Dr. Morlock didn't say the same sign. He said something different. He said a different thing. I mean, yes, if every single teacher has the exact same sign and that's found to be controversial, then I would imagine they're all gone, but they're not all the same. And this policy is purposefully meant to be very vague in that there is a very difficult standard of enforcement, because obviously, like Director Brown said, literally everything has two sides. So to say anything with two sides must be taken out of our school buildings, I mean, we've talked about this at length already in this board. The difficulty in enforcing something as vague as that.
Has the AR been written yet for this?
No, there is no AR because it already follows the complaint process that we have outlined.
Your policy is complete enough because it already outlines the process, the procedure in there. So not all policies have an AR, and this one is pretty clear about what the process is because it's using already a well-defined complaint procedure.
Did
that
not
had the policy and an AR.
Principal Iron from the high school comment though on that? She said she couldn't discuss this because the AR hadn't been written.
No, she, in her email, as I recall it being written, it was something to the effect of, while there's no AR, when I don't have an AR, here's the complaint procedure, and this is how you move forward with it. So she actually included either a link or a place to find, because by law, we're required to have the complaint procedure available on the web, easily found. So she pointed that person in that direction to go ahead and just follow procedure.
So
Hey, Dr. Joe,
Yeah.
I'm looking on our procedures. I don't even see GVG on there. Has it not been uploaded yet?
I'm sorry, where are you looking?
On the policy section? Policies?
Are you on OSBA's website?
No, I was on the Newberg Public Schools website under our policies.
Yeah, that is maintained by OSBA, and he's correct, it's not there. So why is it not there yet?
If you mentioned it's maintained by OSBA, I'm guessing OSBA has to do it.
In the past, the board secretary needs to send policies approved by the board to OSBA, and then there's a certain time lag often before they are able to update those. So I don't know if it's been sent.
It's been sent.
Yeah, so it's just waiting for them to do that work.
We did have some requests from people for a copy of the policy, and we sent those to them. So they asked for a copy of the current policy, and so we sent them what we had sent on to OSBA.
So you're telling all the parents or students or other staff members that have a problem with these images or whatever in the classrooms, then everybody has to file complaints.
They just go through the complaint procedure. They can do it. Yep.
That's what the document says, Renee. That's what's outlined in it.
So, Dr. Joe, when these complaints are written, do they have to be a specific incident or can they be general?
No, they need to be specific to a person or a location where they've seen it.
So if someone can complain that you have this sign up in 16 of your classrooms in this school.
Sure, as long as they were specific to that, but they can't say in general, I don't like the color purple, so that has to be removed from all locations, right? Or whatever that is. So if they're saying, I've seen this symbol, this very specific symbol, this one in these classrooms, detailing them out, then that would be fine.
So I'm okay with the complaint process being the way we adjudicate particular symbols. What concerns me with not having an AR is that you don't have an enforcement mechanism to then send that decision back down into the schools to make sure all instances of that are removed.
No, your policy does that already. So we create administrative regulations when it's different, when the policy is either doesn't have the mechanism in that. But in your policy, you specifically did put the mechanism in, which makes sense for us to have a procedure to do that. And by using the complaint procedure by following pursuant to district policy, right down that last paragraph under the ensuring safe environments to learn. So you've put the mechanism in there. So as it then, let's say that then it reaches a board level, the board determines that this symbol, this symbol X is political, then the first paragraph of that section of ensuring safe environments to learn then says that that one is political, and so that would be removed. But it has to go through each one of those first.
And how will that decision be administered by your administration?
Well, but that would come from you. Then I would inform everybody else that here is the one that's been determined by the board that is political. And then they're all need to follow this policy.
Dave, I think we're going over our 10-minute or 2-minute conversation on each of these items.
Yes, we are. Well, yeah, we'll wrap it up. Joe, is there any chance of putting this this complaint process? You know, I think we need to get this out because, I mean, my phone rings off the hook and people are upset that nothing's been done. It's worse than it's ever been. So what's the deal with, you know, our public needs to know what this process is then, because they're looking to the school board and you to get this thing taken care of. Building administrators is not being taken care of. So I think we at least need to put it on out to all of our people like we would any other update and say, if this is bothering you or not bothering you, this is the process. I mean, they need to know. I mean, half our teachers don't even know how the school board works, let alone how our parents know about something like this.
Hey, Chair Brown and Dr. Morlock, I guess I'm just a little bit confused. We have a public and student complaint procedure, right? I mean, that's kind of all encompassing, right? So why would it just apply to GBG? And why would that preclude an AR being written for clarification? What's the purpose of an AR? Isn't it to give clarification on policies to employees, administrators?
Sometimes, other times is to help out. So there are, let's use a more broad one, like there are some graduation requirements, and the policy on the graduation requirements is not as long as all of the details that we need to make sure that we're following. The kids get the right kinds of things in the right number of credits so they can graduate in the right amount of time. But instead of putting all of that front loading into policy, the board's policy is the superintendent shall develop a procedure to make kids graduate and follow the rules of the Oregon State Diploma and blah, blah, blah. And then the details go into that. But because this is relatively simple, and there are other policies that are like this, that an AR is not required. This one says, you know, they shall, within acting with the scope of their employment, either during school or school hours, inside their physical area of responsibility. So you've already detailed when it is and where it is, and then what they are: poster signs, flags, banners, pictures, digital, physical image. So you've already defined, you made all your definitions. And then in general, you're saying that if they don't like it, then they file a complaint. So you've already got the procedure in there. So then when the decision is rendered by this, if it gets to this court, it may not even get there. It may be an early determination. I had an email earlier that asked about certain kinds of things. And it's like, well, no, those are obviously political. So those are supporting specific political party, which again, we can't do. So those are easier. But other ones that may come to you as a board, if you determine that this specific image is what you would consider to be political by a vote of the board, then that immediately goes into effect on this other side.
But during the complaint procedure, that would come to you prior to going to the board, right? So
Correct.
You would rule on those. Do you have any of those in the?
I have one so far, and we have a couple more that are happening that are, I think, still at the building level.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Trevor, the policy is determined by the board, is voted on the board. The AR is created by the superintendent, and the board doesn't approve or work on that. That's the responsibility of the superintendent. So
No.
that's-
Director Burris, I understand that. I understand that Dr. Morlock is not required to write an AR. That's up to him. I guess, and that wasn't really my question. I guess what I ended with. I think I got all my questions answered.
All right, we could probably spend about 2 days on this one. So let's move on to number B. Director Pyros, you have Superintendent Standing Committee for Policy GBG. Go ahead.
What was that, Dave?
The next one is the one you brought up about the Superintendent Standing Committee for Policy GBG procedures.
Yes, that thinking of what we've just discussed, GBG a concern, it is important for the staff and the admin. It's something I've been plugging every meeting possibly. And you once agreed that we should spend time with having a standing committee, a superintendent standing committee, not a board policy, a board meeting committee, but that it gives a chance for the staff to work together to create, maybe to help determine what is political, what is not political, what is acceptable to both parties or all sides, so that we don't have so many complaints, because the complaint process goes through the process and gives everyone a chance to speak, but it also is time consuming for the educators in our buildings. If we can work together to create something that will help this policy really enact what that will help to really get our focus back on education and let the educators, the admin people work together. And I suggest possibly 6-month committee. I want to ask Joe, Dr. Morlock, what his viewpoint is on this.
Well, it certainly opens up to more stakeholders to get a broader view of what those things would be. And we can certainly put something together for a standing committee to meet and to talk about them. That would be something that the board would like to see. That would bring more voices to the table. It might make it more challenging. It might make it easier. I think that those are, I think the challenge in this topic is to define political versus non-political. And where that comes in, but it might be interesting to have some input from a broader group of stakeholders.
Would we need to, could we just direct you to do that, or would we need to ask you just to form a committee?
Well, I mean, that would be something that would come from the whole board. I think the board would probably need to put that together. So if you wanted to consider that, and if we're on the agenda for next time, to make a directive of it. I can explore a little bit about what that looks like, so I can give you more information at the next meeting if that were on the agenda.
I would suggest that I would like to see it on the agenda, Dave. I don't know what action needs to be taken, but I would really feel that it would be also giving our teachers a chance to share their insights and what would work and what wouldn't work. And our administrators too.
Well, I'm gonna I guess I would say we can definitely put on the agenda for the next time. I think some of our staff members have shown very clearly where they stand on this issue. The defiance is through the roof, and it's troubling to a lot of people in our community. And so when we select these staff members, I've also said over and over that we have a lot of staff members who do not feel safe. I talk to them all the time, and yet we don't seem to want to believe that. So when we talk about which staff, whose staff, is going to be part of something like that, we've got staff out there right now doing recalls, standing on picnic tables, telling people what to do. They're wearing every kind of clothing imaginable. They're being defiant. And the teachers that don't agree with that don't like it. So, I mean, it's kind of a tough time right now for something like that. So,
But this would be something that could help to bridge the two sides together. We could work together and to come to say what is acceptable on both sides. It would be a wonderful opportunity, I think, to really start bridging and building back trust.
I guess, Director Pavos, I would say write that up a little bit more clear, be a little bit more broad in that, because I would love to see people come together and meet in the middle. I haven't seen much of that lately. So if you can frame that in a way, that would be awesome to bring it back to the board.
I think in all fairness to all board members, Director Shannon should read his message in the chat box out loud.
Oh, sure. Someone asked in our chat, can someone please explain what GBGN ARR? I am a student from PSU observing for a class, and I just respond to him. GBG is a policy the board has passed. AR equals administrative regulation, which the superintendent writes to implement policies. So I was just trying to be helpful to that young man, and everyone can see it. So I don't know why I had to read it, but that's fine.
Not everyone can see it, Brian. So thank you.
Oh, fair enough.
I think it might only go to hosts and panelists, so that may be why.
Well, Director Shan, thanks for being helpful. Okay, we're on to C. Board meeting efficiency is one I brought up. It's more of, I talked to Dr. Joe about this a while back, that we, in our first meeting of the month, would try to streamline our presentations from his staff to us, that his staff would get to us early with their emails to explain what they're going to be talking about. I will use Nikki Fowler as an example of someone who always comes ready to say her stuff. Boom, she's done, and we move on through it pretty quickly. So that was the whole thing about board meeting efficiency, was trying to get our times down. Obviously tonight we failed, so it's my fault. So we got that one down. The next one.
Sorry, just really quick. I'd like to really quickly clarify. I don't think that the staff members are to blame for the long meetings. And I think putting it unfairly on their presentation times is not a real true reflection of actual meetings.
I agree. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that talk to them about that we would try to get through those meetings with an email, a shorter time frame for the presentation. If the presentation ever needs a long time, they can let us know and say, hey, I just need this amount of time. So it's not a knock on them at all. We'll just try to knock those out really good. And then Jennifer and I have talked, also about like a board meeting like tonight. We just have business that still comes up that we you guys already know what we talked about earlier. So some of the stuff will pop up we have to get through. So it just leaves less time now for discussions. So
may I also say that it's up to us board members to email the presentators, the staff members ahead of time, so they're prepared with our answers.
Yep.
So that we're not springing a lot of questions on them, that we actually give them forewarning of what we want to ask.
Yep, I agree. Being us prepared, them prepared, both ends. Yeah.
Does this mean going forward that we're only having board comment and public comment at once a month?
Well, hopefully our public comment, board comment's going to get lower. We can talk about that. I don't have that on the list tonight, but
no, it was just because it was part of efficiency, and I noticed that that's been the trend with these workshop meetings, is that we cut out public comment and board comment, and I just didn't know if that was going to be the norm going forward.
No, it really wasn't the intent to do that. It was more of like, we've got so many things to, like some of these things coming up here. So can we come back to that one? So I understand why you're saying that. I've got one more there. All students are important. I know that got a little bit of everybody fired up. I still go back to, as a board, there's been so much divisiveness in our community. When we talk about all students, are important, to me, it's just, again, this is my take. So if you want to say your 2 cents on this, go ahead. I hear this all the time out in the community. That's how, I worked when I worked in the schools, is every single student's important. And I just want to make sure that we remember that when we do all of our work and our policies. And so that's pretty simple. I don't know how to say it any more simple than that. Is every single student that we have in our district, whether they're K through 12 or whoever they are just as important as the next student right next to them. So if you have anything to add to that, go ahead. Pretty simple one. Okay, number E, Rebecca, you're back up. OSBA policy. This is one you had. Go ahead.
Well, this is now before you nominated me to the position, and now we need to vote. If you vote for my position as a legislative policy committee member for District 13, that each school board in Yamhill and Polk County will be have also been sent ballots. So it's I'd like to ask the board if they would vote for me for OSBA Legislative Policy Committee member.
When are the ballots due, Rebecca?
The middle of November.
Okay, so we can have it on our agenda at the next meeting.
Yes.
For sure. We'll get that on there for sure. Jen Nelson, you going to help me remember that one? I'm writing it down, but that's an important one, so we got to do that for.
I already have it on our future planning.
Awesome,
Okay.
thank you. Next one, board media interviews. It's kind of a broad one, but with everything that's been happening, we've all been contacted probably more than once. I guess my comment on this one was how are we going to operate in as a board? Are we gonna work as a board? Or are we gonna put out our personal opinions on those? I mean, I'm just asking. I've done these also, and in the best interest of our district. What do you guys think about this one?
So I have a question. You mentioned you've done these interviews, and I would like to know, how are you talking to these interviewers, with your personal opinion or as a board, as a whole board? I'm just curious.
Well, when they contact me, they ask me what I think's going on, and I try to stay pretty middle of the road, not get too crazy on it, because they're asking me as a person on a school board in Newberg. So I don't take pot shots at any of you guys or throw anybody under the bus or throw Dr. Joe under the bus. I just sit there and answer the questions that they're throwing at me. That's how I operate. As we move forward, we're going to have more and more of this. So again, I'm just throwing that one out there. It's a little bit uncomfortable though, because if we're out there in our local paper, which has happened quite a bit, I'm not saying you guys, I'm just saying it gets pretty negative in that thing. What are we doing? I mean, how are we operating on that? How do we want to operate?
I would like to operate without fear. I mean, I have not been talking to media because I have safety concerns. And that's how I would hope that we could operate without fear. What that looks like for each of us, I don't know. But I have chosen not to speak to media. I will continue to do so until I feel safe. And that is my personal choice.
Nope, I appreciate that. Anybody else? Anything to add to that?
I pray I ask that we be kind. If you are gonna speak, that you just be kind.
I think we've.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment, Dave, is that, we're really ambassadors of the school board, the school district, and the community. So, how we represent ourselves during interviews, reflects on all of those. So we need to do it with honesty and respect, taking into account who we represent.
Okay. Anybody else? You guys are awfully quiet. Okay. We are on number G, meetings in November. I have to ask this every time, you guys, so we're back to it again. November, in person or Zoom. Definitely have had, I'm sure you guys all get it too. Same thing. We're here again. Dr. Joe and I've talked about where we could meet in person, but the public would still remain in Zoom. But a lot of people have made comments why we're not meeting in person when the Park and Rec Board, City Council, county stuff, all meeting in person. We're not. So we did talk about having meetings at the district office with the fact that we know Zoom now has really encouraged a lot of people to participate in our meetings, which is great. So I think our ratings are probably better than some of the TV shows out there. So if we continue on that, we would not lose Zoom as an option, even if I don't think we'll ever go back to full in person. But in the meantime, if we do meet in person, I think last time, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think Chair or Director Pinner and I were the only two that said, fine, we'll meet in person. I think the rest of you guys were a little, but like right now, I know some people have health concerns and that's legit. So again, if we keep this to Zoom for the public, we can start to attempt to meet back in person to see what that looks like for the district and Dr. Joe, for Jennifer Nelson moving forward, because at some point we're going to have to go back into person here. So that would be the slow way to start that. Does that make sense, everybody? So we would meet in person if you choose to come. If not, you would be on Zoom as well as the public, and then we would keep the public on Zoom until we make that determination to let them back in the doors.
So there'd be an option for like myself, I'm still not,
Yes. Yeah.
I would be able to be on Zoom.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just what our makeup is. So we have to go with that. So,
having participated in hybrid meetings, actually, it's kind of interesting because when I joined the board 4 years ago, there was a member who traveled quite a bit at certain times of the year. And so they would often be like the head on the iPad. And I think our technology has come further in the last 4 years. I'm hopeful. But I think for all of us, we all need to be really aware, for those of us who are meeting in person, to really help ensure that we're including those who are on virtual, right? Because that can be tough. I mean, it's already tough to jump in and contribute and, not interrupt. And it could just get a little bit more cumbersome. So I think really having that consciousness of ensuring that any member who is virtual is included in the conversation.
No, it's a great comment, because I think like for Rebecca, I think that would be something in that first meeting we go to that you would feel, just like you would right now. So we would definitely, I would say we'd probably make a few mistakes. I think Zoom is going to allow for a few mistakes here and there. That's not a knock on Jen Nelson at all. That's just saying it's a tough task. But that first meeting, we'd have to make sure, I think we slow down enough to make sure that we're staying in contact, say with Rebecca on that one.
Well, I'll speak up loudly too.
Well, I mean, I think what Director Pinner's saying is it definitely, the technology is way better than it was, but sometimes, we would want to make sure, and then we'd probably make a few errors in that first meeting, and then we'd have to hear about it at the end and correct those for the next meeting. So I think it's the best way moving forward for the district office, talking to Dr. Joe and Jennifer, that we start slow and a little bit more simple. So
Chair Brown.
Rebecca's light hit first though, so I'm like,
Okay.
no. Price is right.
Would, if you're in person, would we be required to wear masks and be vaccinated?
Well, either the board members aren't required to share if they're vaccinated or not. I think in our boardroom, we can be as far apart as we need to be. So
But
And
would we be?
I would
we
say masked as well.
what's that?
Mask.
I would say masked as well. We're in an indoor setting in a school facility, so I think being masked is important.
Well, I believe we're required to be, aren't we? Right now. Joe, is that rule still in effect?
Yep, that is correct. Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. Yep.
There you go.
And then my other concern is, do we have the technology set up and purchased and whatever to put the members who are in person on the same footing in the Zoom world as the rest of the members who aren't?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's just kind of go around to a straw poll really quick. Director Powell, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm game for whatever.
Okay. Director Pyros?
I would say if everyone else wants to go in person, I would still stay on Zoom.
Okay. Director Shannon?
I'm fine moving to a hybrid model.
Okay, a little out of order here, just to shake it up tonight. It's getting a little bit late. We're almost done. Superintendent Morlock, how would you view this? What's your vote?
It's the board's business meeting. I will do either.
You could wear the fun socks again. I mean,
I'm still wearing the fun socks. You just don't get to see them when you're on Zoom.
I know. I know. Director Pena, what's your feeling?
I would be comfortable being hybrid as long as I knew that the people in the room with me were vaccinated. So because I can't demand you all show me your vaccine cards, I would stay virtual.
Okay. Director Penner.
I'm comfortable with hybrid as well.
Thank you. Director DeHart.
I'm fine with hybrid. I just, I don't want to be wearing a mask for 3 hours straight during the meeting and having my voice muffled. So that's my only concern.
So what do you say, hybrid or stay the way we are?
Well, if we're going to be required to, if it's in one of the, Newberg facilities and we're required to wear masks, I'd probably stay hybrid.
Okay. So when you say hybrid, I mean, Director Penner, you said the same thing. So you're saying stay at home, stay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, you go virtual. Okay. Well, doggone it. He just left out there. I was going to just to wake him up because he's been sitting there so long with Shiloh. He just turned his camera off though. I was going to ask him his opinion because he never got to say anything all night long.
Who are you talking about?
Huh?
Who are you talking about?
Shiloh, he's on here. I was going to ask him his opinion. He never gets to say anything. He sat here for 3 straight meetings and he's just sitting there looking good in his den or whatever. I was going to ask him what he thought.
You guys could do, I'm fine with whatever you guys decide. I'll be there wherever is required.
Okay. I just wanted to wake you up. I didn't want you to fall asleep on me. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, you guys. I'll talk to Dr. Joe and Jennifer and Brian a little bit more about that as we move towards our next agenda meeting, and we'll get back to you on that one. So thanks for talking about that one. Then we got another one here. You guys got a few more minutes. We're at 9:23. We got a couple more we got to get to. So number H there is Director Pyros. You said proclamation better together. Talk about that.
I wanted to present this proclamation that when we created the policy, we said what we couldn't do, but I feel it's important to say what staff can do. And I thought of this proclamation after we received a letter from a constituent who agreed with the ban, but also commented how much she liked the slogan "Better Together," and that would help bring us all together. So I'm going to ask Jen to read the proclamation because I think it's important. And I don't know if we can adopt it tonight or if we need to put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes, I did send this to the board, and I will read it right now, what your recommendation is for discussion, and we probably would need to publicize if we're going to do it for the next meeting. Whereas the Newberg School Board is committed to ensuring a safe and welcoming atmosphere to every student attending our schools. And whereas the Newberg School Board wants to ensure that there are no political, quasi-political, and or controversial flags or banners in our schools. Whereas to reflect the Newberg School Board wanting to show what is allowable under the recently passed policy GBG, we, the Newberg School Board Directors, hereby recognize the graphic image Better Together as presented is an acceptable and non-political, non-quasi-political, and non-controversial sign to show validation to every student and can be put up into any classroom or office and has been adopted on this day.
So without getting into the specifics of the symbol that you're asking us to approve, I'm really uncomfortable with this approach because we've already, in our conversations tonight, established that this is a complaint-driven process, and we are the final appellate body for all complaints. And so we would essentially be prejudicing ourselves on a matter that somebody could complain about. So I don't think that would be appropriate. I think it's very unlikely someone will complain about that, what you're asking for there. So I don't think it will even come up, but it wouldn't be appropriate for us as a board to start picking and choosing which things people aren't allowed to file complaints about under our policies.
So if the complaint came before us today with this image, would you say that this is a political image?
It would be inappropriate to discuss that because we would be prejudicing ourselves. I don't know how much clearer I can say that. That's not how you do it.
Rebecca, I think it's clear that any of your attempts at bringing any kind of conversation and bridging the community are falling upon deaf ears, but I appreciate the efforts and I would support this resolution proclamation if it becomes before the board.
Well, I guess I would counter on that too, though, that you know, the staff has clearly shown that they're the ones that have decided to participate, that you know, defiance is one of their motives right now, and it makes it difficult. So,
well, but if we give them something that they can accept, that they know that this is a safe emblem, that it's innocuous, it's something that brings us together, and if we can agree on something as simple as this, better together. I mean, and it's showing the colors similar to what Director Shannon agreed to with Director Pinna's headscarf. He said he had no problems with the rainbow colors there. He already made that decision in the previous meeting. And it would only help to bring us together. And isn't that what we're trying through all of this, that we take something out of contention so that it won't become a concern? Or if it does, then it goes through the process. But if we've already decided this is not a political, non-quasi-political or non-controversial statement, so be it. I mean, we could at least show they get defiant when they're showing what they can't do without showing them what they can do.
Hey, Rebecca, I would suggest that, you know, we wait to hear from Dr. Morlock on what what a committee would look like to have these discussions with the stakeholders. I think that's the starting point.
Yeah, because would they be willing to take out all the other and just have better together? I mean, I don't know what everyone's thinking.
What do you mean take out all the other?
I'll take out the pride and the BLM because that's been the big issue that we've been addressing all along. And do better together. Is that what's going to bring us to all together?
Well, it seems to be resonating with many people.
Because maybe that would be less threatening to students and parents that have an issue with the other flags or symbols. I would like to get, input on how these other people might feel about that. So,
I think we would be opening a real Pandora's box if we start going down the road of having everyone come and pre-approve things with us.
yeah.
Well, it's better that they come in the complaint process and have every single thing shut down.
The
because that's what
bar
our
for a
principle
complaint is fairly high. I
Okay.
mean, someone has to really be concerned with something before they're going to complain to a building administrator or to the superintendent or to us. The bar is much lower to try and get 1,000 different things pre-approved. And it's just not appropriate. It's not the process.
Aren't they already doing the Better Together anyway? They're wearing the t-shirts and having the symbols up in the room, so they're already doing it.
Sure, but there's uncertainty of who knows, somebody could report them and they don't know. I mean, we have staff members walking through our halls every single day, totally unaware if somebody has a problem with something that they happen to be wearing or up in their classroom, and they have to just wait and see if somebody makes a complaint against it. That is not a sustainable way for people to operate in their professional settings, let alone also creating space for children to learn. So I would imagine that what Director Pyros is doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is saying at least this one thing is okay. There's uncertainty of literally everything else, but this one thing is okay.
So you say that though, when our staff clearly understands what this policy stands for, and the staff who's decided to be defiant of this have gone overboard in their defiance.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, do you remember back on August 10th when I said that resistance will always subvert oppression? It will be whack-a-mole. There is no way, and that's been my entire argument against this document since the beginning, but we're on the road, we're on the train, so we're seeing it now. There's no way that you, me, the board, anybody, Dr. Morlock, superintendents, will ever be able to police our educators in the way that you are intending. And that is what this process will show us. By having one symbol to say, yes, this is okay, that will lead at least some certainty into this incredibly chaotic situation.
How about having the American flag be our symbol?
Well, that's clearly in every classroom by law, so check.
So there we go. I don't know why we need all these symbols.
All right. Well, we got some more talking on that one. Okay, so on our last one, where Rebecca Pyros, again, you're on number L.
I was wondering if we could consider that since we've passed the point of the policy, which the Tyler Smith, the lawyer was hired for, I wonder if it's time to consider terminating his contract, and anything that we need help with, such as formal complaints to the board, we can ask WESD. We talked with her tonight, Lisa. That doesn't cost the district any money. We pay for it with credits, and it would be a way to save some money and to use a lawyer who's much more familiar with school districts. So I'd like to get that to be considered.
Any other comments there?
I think it's a valid point. It's a valid question of if this attorney was retained as supplemental legal counsel for a situation that is resolved, why would we still retain that attorney?
I'm perfectly fine having an item on the next agenda on whether to continue to retain Mr. Smith.
All righty. Any other comments, you guys?
If we're talking about future agenda items, though, I'd like to remind you that I requested that we have an agenda item on here to talk about how the formal complaint process is going against board members. We know that there have been complaints filed and there's still uncertainty. As a board member, I have no idea. I don't know what's happening with them. We've not addressed that as a board. I think we need to do that. And then also knowing what's happening. Are we doing public and board comments only once a month? How is that going forward? Those would be my two questions and suggestions.
I have a wonderment too, Dave, for the future work sessions. Could we have more details about whoever is going to present that we know a little bit beforehand what it is, like with the questions about the board efficiency, the all of the issues. I appreciate to study up on each issue beforehand.
Yeah, I think, some of these are, it starts a conversation going that we've never had in the past on a lot of these issues. Like tonight, we've gone through all these and it starts a conversation, whether we agree or disagree. Some of these are going to be moved onto an agenda item. Some of them are, get a little bit more important. Some of them are more, generic. So, I think, why don't we do this? I mean, would this answer your question? So if as we move forward into the next, working session, we'll have things we have to put on here that we had tonight, right? Regular business items. And so, if you propose something on there, then we just need to, get something to the rest of the board members, just a quick sentence or two about, just the gist of it. And would that be okay?
Or should it be in the board package so that it's available to the public also?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion, that whoever is leading a topic, get the information to our secretary so that it is in our board packet for the public to have in advance.
No, that's a good idea. I like it. So Jen, do you got that? One more thing to do. You're awesome. I could tell the look on your face. You're like, yeah, buddy, that's awesome.
If the work's on you, you just have to get it to me. I can get it in there.
All right, send those to me, you guys. I asked before, Rebecca was the only one that did a great job on this one. Sorry, nobody else gets any extra credit because she sent in 4 and the rest of you, so send in something if there's a topic you want to talk about. I think moving forward, I would just say as a board, when we're talking about our efficiency, is at least we're talking. So it may not be what you wanted to hear, it may not be, and stuff like that, but at least we're getting discussions going on stuff. And that's a good thing. So Dr. Joe, do you have anything else for us tonight?
I have 12 more items if people have enough time to stick around.
Sure.
No, thanks for asking. No, Dave. No, thank you very much.
It's not about which socks you like, or you're going to show each one. We're going to vote on them.
No, you'll have to wait for in-person meetings for those.
Okay,
Or
guys, all go. Everybody say goodnight, Shiloh. Come on, everybody say goodnight, Shiloh.
good night,
Night,
Shiloh.
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 Good night, Shiloh. Good night, you guys.
Thanks, everybody.